Welcome to the Intrinsic First Leadership Podcast. I'm Aaron Robbins with Intrinsic First. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Be sure to stick around to the end for some debatably funny jokes that will hopefully leave you with a smile. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes. We're here to support you, and we'd love to hear from you. So drop us a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. Ready to dive into the world of leadership? Let's get started. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our 2 of 2 for Persona podcast. In our last podcast, we were talking about persona and kind of went through the basics of it and started getting into some different discussions. We wanted to keep going, so we have more to talk about there. So let's jump into it.
The best thing that anyone can do for somebody who they're leading is to ask, well, it's funny, there's so many interesting movies that people could see in order to see it reflected back to them. But at one point, you've got to find places in your heart are touched by the things that are outside of you that give you a sense of other possibilities. You have to begin to see the possibilities you bring to your circumstance and then say, okay, what are my other possibilities? What else? Well, so instead of coming back to my own circumstance, I realized that I had to get out away from the family I was in, the family circumstances that I was in, and find people who would say, Drea, you're not like that if you don't want to be. You know. And which is, I think leaders have to begin to help other people see what leadership is, which is, what are some of the alternatives that I can use here to be more effective than I presently am? And so we go back to the gentleman who would never change. I really wish that I had a chance to work with that man, because I could have said to him, in this case, what other alternatives do you have beside the one you have, which is to fire somebody or to tell them or to pressure them to do something under your pressure? What alternatives was that when I told that leader, here's my truth. I know you might not like it, but here's what I saw. That happened. It could have been, okay, what other things could she have done as a leader in order for the impact, which is, I want to hear your truth, but the minute I hear it, I don't like it, so you better not say it.
Right.
What are the alternatives? So being a mirror as a leader, being mindful of the choices to continually help people make choices, and for the reasons that they then, when they make it themselves, they suddenly realize that that's probably for them the wisest thing they could have done.
Yeah, it's always, yeah. I mean, I've always believed in helping others. That's kind of my one of my values, and as a leader, I think you're in a position to do that. And now,
could you give a coaching example? With a parent?
I think of parents all the time. I think I come across parents that want the best for their children. They want to put them in an environment that challenges them, helps them learn, discover a little bit about themselves, and they want to do their best to facilitate that. But there's no book or there's no license that you have to get to be a parent, and so they're trying to figure it out as they go along. And so, coaching for coaching youth sports for nearly 15 years at this point, you see a lot of pitfalls along the way. And so anything I can do to help a parent to don't pay your child every time they score a touchdown. Like, you don't want to do that.
Don't praise.
Don't praise them.
Did I tell you about the couple? Man, I know they were doing their best, but holy cow. They were coaching the kids soccer, and I didn't own up to doing it. I was busy doing work and stuff. But
you mean you could have been a parent volunteer?
I could have been a parent volunteer, and they did it, so good on them. But holy cow, they kept gummy bears in their pocket, and every time the kids in practice did anything,
they gave them a gummy bear.
And they didn't just give them a gummy bear. Sometimes they would literally feed it into their mouth because the kids thought that was funny. It was like watching dog training. It just made me cringe to watch. I couldn't go to the practice.
Well, I think that's a great segue to our future podcast on motivation, why you don't want to do that.
Sure.
But I mean, when you do that, you totally you just kill the drive for the child, or they do it as a transaction, and it's not sustainable over time. And so, or just teaching parents how to give feedback to their children is huge. The car ride home, don't sit there and berate your child and tell them everything that went wrong. I mean, just give them time to So being able to help others, and in youth sports, helping parents understand those simple concepts are. Yeah, I think that's what any leader would want to do, is help the people around them better, make them better. And
so from a leadership perspective, in terms of persona, there's two aspects of it. One is themselves, from a prepare perspective, is helping them understand. And I guess this really gets more into the envision practice that we'll talk about at some point. But there's also the aspect of helping others understand and align their persona triad. But I guess we're more focused.
Well, I think I don't want to get away from the triad too much. And if we were in a true training situation, there would be a whole series of exercises that we would ask people to consider doing and working with. But we get trapped into persona, forcing personas on people, or forcing people, or short-circuiting their ability to become more aware of their own persona. What person do I kind of want to be? Because we've got all these rituals about, here's how you train somebody.
Yeah.
And one of the worst ones is the whole carrot and stick that runs through organizations constantly. Oh, well, if we want them to sell that, want them to sell more of that, let's incentivize it through a contest, or a prize, bonus, or and we've got to get at that carrot and stick it mentality, which we will, as a full training program, of course, which Intrinsic First offers right now. Yep. But it's the idea that we get trapped into these what I would call myths about what works.
Yeah, and I think you have to do the work internally to figure out where you stand on this. And the word tension, I like the word that you talk about when you're trying to talk about who I am today and who do I want to become. There's a tension between those 2 points. The more tension, not so good, right? But
that's esteem.
Right. Yes.
Right.
And so the idea is that you want to be able to have those two aligned as best as possible, so it kind of releases that tension. And I think where it gets really tricky is when you talk about the other people's perception of you and who you should become. And so that, we could do a whole workshop on that. I think
it's changing.
It's
like
always changing. Yes.
Right.
Yes. But it's important to do the work and understand how it's changing from you first before you can deal with other people, I think. So, but
and I think highlights how important it is to go through those processes to understand your disposition, understand your values.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, it's going to be that much more dynamic, because you're not only are you constantly realizing new things about how people see you, or what you think people see you as, but you're constantly shifting in terms of what you think your values are, because you haven't really actually developed them, and going back and forth. Well, maybe I think this, or maybe I think that, and it could be situational, and man, that can become a mess.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to the idea for leadership is, who is your leader? What's the person, or your favorite leader? What's your image of the best leader? Who are you working for or with, or what model would you best So there are lots of leadership movies that would be interesting. Things like, I don't know if you've ever seen a movie called Hoosiers.
Yeah.
Or 12 O'Clock High, or there are so many interesting leadership models. Even I thought the Gandhi movie that was done, Ben Kingsley did, it's just extraordinary to see how he managed some of the circumstances he was in. And the same thing about Mandela as another one, or I start thinking about the world, the historical leaders of the world, and getting into the characters, getting into the Lincoln. Lincoln was just an extraordinary example of.
And through all those examples you just threw out, they all had their way of leading. They had their own disposition, so they handled situations much somewhat differently. But I think there's something to draw from that. I think it's important to study those leaders. I mean, you got to study the great.
The greats, the greats,
if you want to be good.
And not at the strategic level, but at the interactive level, like the Gandhi story about sugar. I mean, that just hit me right between the eyes, because the interesting thing about Gandhi was that he was brought up and educated in England, and he was a barrister. He was barrister trained, and in the middle of it, when he went to England, one of the beliefs he had was that the reason why the sun never set on English soil, do you remember that? That's a historical statement. That because they had conquered / infiltrated / whatever word you'd like to put in places all over the world, so the sun never really set on English soil. Meaning,
they were all There's always nighttime somewhere in England,
or daytime.
But what it was that he believed that was because they ate meat. So in an early part of his life, he decided that since he was he started to, and of course he was a vegetarian when the young man, the first Gandhi, got into England. So he started, and he got sick, just sick. He didn't have his stomach didn't have the actual acids to be able to process the amino acids that were part of the meat that he was eating. And he got so sick that he realized he didn't want to do that anymore. But it's the idea that those when we talk about leaders not being born but made. I mean, the same thing happened with Churchill. Churchill was had so many faux pas throughout his entire life. He wasn't particularly powerful or well liked as in Eden, and where he was educated. So they grew through the process of looking at what was right for them. And so that's part of what you're saying is that the work has to come to you through experimentation and what I call, or most people call, is just mindfulness about what's happening here in the moment in the face of what could be happening. So I think that's we could stop it here because the persona questions are heavy or important when you talk about what kind of leader do I want to become, who am I now, how do I get feedback on who others see me being, and not just what they see me being, but what they want me to be. Going out and gathering that information and taking the time to say, will they see me this way? Is that really going to work?
So there almost seems, so you've got the relationships between the triad, right? So
self to be,
how I see myself compared to how I think others want me to be. That's either aligned or conflicting or both, or switching around and changing. There's how I see myself and how I want to be. And there's that relationship. And then there's a relationship of how I want to be and how I think others
I am.
want to.
Okay.
No, and how I think others want to be, which is a whole nother thing. Is am I in line with, am I around people that are aligned and want me to be the person who I want to be?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or am I, feeling lots of pressure because, as a kid, I think, your parents want you to take over the family business or, whatever that is. But I want to be an artist or
exactly.
a pilot or, whatever.
Exactly.
And no, you can't do. So there's those conflicts. And that's what we've been talking about. I almost think that there's also this internal conflict within each one because, for example, there's how you see what you think other people want you to be. But then there's the reality of what people actually want you to be. And so those need to be in alignment too. Otherwise, the more disconnected what people actually want you to be versus what you think they want you to be, the more disconnected that is, the more volatile that situation is going to be, and the more feedback is not going to align with what your expectations were. So it almost seems like, it's one level more complicated where each corner of the triangle is also has to be in alignment. And even with the self, if there's a subconscious aspect, if you haven't done the work to understand your values, to understand your disposition, then the unconscious who you think you are versus how you actually act and when you see yourself acting and behaving, if that's not aligning, then you're going to have this constant spiral probably where, lots of negative feelings come up because you're constantly disappointing yourself because you think you're one way and you're acting in a different way. But that's not who you want to be. That's all within,
it's a battle.
How you see yourself.
It's a battle. I was working with the Chicago Cubs a while back, and I was invited by the director of player personnel to come and do some training with their high potential ball players. And as luck would have it, I said yes, I'm going to do that. And they were at spring training, and the Cubs would go into Yuma, Arizona, to do their training, and I got these 40 young ball players, and I started to teach the dispositions, and I did a good job that day because apparently after about 3 hours of talking about it and learning about it and beginning to get some feedback through the instrumentation that we had through the questionnaires that we have that allows them to kind of discover themselves through the I'd come out of the class and I'm not out of about 15 minutes, and the player person comes through, hey, what did you do? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, my best shortstop prospect. But we were going to move him up to the majors this year. He said, he's gone to the airport. He's quit. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, he says, one doesn't want to play anymore. Go back and get him.
That's so funny. I've had those. That's like a leadership backfire, right? You're helping somebody understand who they are, and then they realize they don't want to do their job anymore. Like, oh man, but you're the high performer. Don't go. But I want the best for you. But
well, so I run down to the airport. This goes a little further. I run down to the airport, and there he is. And I said, Nick, what are you doing? He says, I don't want to do this, Treya. I don't want to do this. Well, do you what? He said, I don't want to be a shortstop. Well, I said, I'm sorry to hear that. He said, well, what are you doing? He said, I realized for the first time today, and some of the things you said, that I'm doing it for my girlfriend, and I'm doing it for my parents, and I don't want to do it anymore. I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I want to be I want to be an art gallery owner in Dallas.
That sounds like a sequel to the Zohan movie.
It was so fun. It was tragic, but it was also, okay, I'm doing my job.
Why don't you go make a lot of money in the majors and then go on your art gallery?
But then you can buy your own.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There's a kind of a way this
deal
works.
With the imposed
you want art? I'll show you.
This is just
what do you think Alex Rodriguez has got? $250 million.
This is a means to the end. Just go play your shortstop.
But it's the idea that those realizations are gold for people. They just, all of a sudden you realize you just can't do this anymore. Why? Because your heart's telling you not to do it. Your mind's telling you not to do it. Your everything else is telling you you should do it. Be my boyfriend. I gotta, that kind of stuff. It is.
Well, I think that's a good lead-in. Because I think the next podcast is going to be on motivation. Do you agree?
I have to talk to the guys at Intrinsic First. I don't know.
I'd love to talk about motivation next, and what you're getting into a lot with, this is all persona and everything's obviously interrelated, but we're starting to now talk about motivation and the quality of motivation. And I'm only doing it because this misperception of what people want me to be versus what I want to be. But that now gets into outlooks, motivational outlooks.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, my wife the other day wanted to go work out together. She wanted to do some lunges, and I was like, "Whoa, that's taking a pretty big first step."
And he got that kind of reverse.
That's all right. I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to make it look perfect.
I want a good way there. That was not crickets.
Do you want to redo the whole? Just start over. I can't believe.
Can't believe you set that up.
So, were you the one that did the tire one too?
Which explain it. Remember? Can't remember.
Where you said that reminds me when I was a kid. You got me so good on that one.
I think so. It was in Hop Stop, right? I just don't remember the joke though.
You said, that reminds me when I was a kid. My dad used to put me in a tire and roll me down the street. It was a good year.
And you're like, oh my God, he did what?
I totally thought it. Took me about 2 seconds to realize what he was doing to me. Oh man.
Why don't we do something subtler? Like what have you been reading lately? I've been reading this book on gravity, and I can't put it down.
Congrats! You made it to the end of the episode. Thanks for tuning in. We genuinely hope that you found value in our conversation. If you liked it, please click that like button below and subscribe so that you can stay up to date on our current episodes. And if you didn't like it, you can click the dislike button, but make sure you click it twice. We're eager to hear from you, whether it's your thoughts, questions, topic ideas, or if you're interested in our leadership training and consulting support. Leave us a comment below or reach out to us directly at info@intrinsicfirst.com. We're open to any and all feedback. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you back for more insightful leadership discussion. Until next time.